Marco, call the roll.
Mr. Christo.
Present.
Mrs. Miller Herrera, absent. Mr. Dotson.
Present.
Mr. Mastriani is absent. Mrs. Collins.
Present.
So 3 present, 2 absent for the agenda.
Does anybody have any comments or objections to the agenda?
Does anybody have any comments or objections to the agenda?
No, just, what is the gift from Vincey's Printing, Madam Supervisor?
The gift from Vincey's Printing is we had called to get an estimate for 10 signs to advertise the tree lighting ceremony with all the extras that we have this year. And he said that he would like to donate them to the town.
Great.
So we have a resolution accepting it. Is there any other questions on the agenda?
No?
I'll make a motion to close.
Motion by Mr. Dodson.
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Christo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's closed.
5 minutes?
Cool.
No word from Joe.
No.
To order, Ms. Marco, will you call the roll?
Mr. Christo.
Present.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson.
Present.
Mr. Mastriani is absent. Mrs. Collins.
Present.
3 present, 2 absent.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Marco. Quorum is present. Please join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Christo, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want everyone to know that there is a proposed executive session after the resolution portion of our meeting. All right, we'll now move to privilege of the floor. I just want to remind everybody, if occasionally while you're speaking, you would look at me, when you get to be around 3.5 minutes, I'll kind of raise my hand, and you'll know to kind of wrap up your remarks. All right? Ms. Marco, is there anybody who signed for privilege of the floor?
There is, and then I had gotten an email from Robert Godlewski. He wasn't able to come. He wanted me to read this. I agree we should have a moratorium on all solar projects in the town. Too much valuable land is being used to support these projects. In the Gazette article dated November 13th, 2022, Deputy Supervisor Dotson spoke of getting legislation in line to regulate this growth. I agree. While the moratorium is in effect, the town board should do a review of the actual tax impact and revenue these project produce for the town. Over the last couple of years, most of these large projects have received millions of dollars of assessment reduction. In my discussion with the town assessor, Mr. Canning, he informed me that because the way current state law is written, he has no choice but to reduce these assessments. These projects are also getting all types of tax exemptions and economic development aid at the expense of the taxpayer. In talking with Mr. Canning, he indicated that the town could take some type of legislation action to prevent this. As a legislative body, I ask that you review this issue and take legislative action if appropriate. Thank you for your attention to this issue. Bob Godlewski, 1046 Manus Drive.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Jamie Ferdie? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Fordyce. I'm here from East Light Partners, a renewable energy company. I think we're here to speak tonight on the topic of the moratorium under consideration by the town board. People here are likely aware of the solar project we've been working on with Mel and Lynn Panicia at their property on Sanborn Road, which has been under review by the planning board since our initial application in August of 2021. We recognize it's not a meeting about that project. No calls from the public for the moratorium have come from residents living in the vicinity of the project as proposed, and we believe it's important to bring our voice into the discussion as the board considers the moratorium. First point I'd like to speak briefly to is why we're here, why we're having this discussion. We're having this discussion because we need energy and new forms of it. We all use electricity in increasing amounts, and it's widely recognized that the way we produce electricity today is unsustainable for future generations. New York State recognizes this, and that we have a short window in which to act to effect a transition so that the environments and industries and economies we depend on can be preserved. It's now state law, not a goal but law, that over the next decade we rapidly correct how we produce electricity in New York to achieve 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 40% emissions-free energy by 2040. As we take on this challenge, our company believes it's critical that we do so in a manner that's consistent with sensitivity to environmental and local resources. We, of course, look for properties that are in locations with access to electrical infrastructure and have the right physical elements for efficient solar design. But we also look to minimize and avoid, where possible, overlap with important agricultural land, habitat for threatened and endangered species, and other sensitive resources. We also screen for view shed and looking for sites which are largely out of sight, out of mind. And this has been true in our process in working with Mel and Lynn that brought us to their property, and which actually scores well on all these fronts. So we approached the town very early on in the process, meeting with the town planner and the town supervisor in June 2020 to take a temperature on the suitability of this location. We did the same with the Planning Commission at our first meeting in August of 2021. We received highly favorable feedback, and I'll just highlight a few of the comments. You can review the minutes from our first meeting then. One member said, "I don't see any problems up there with the project. I think it's a good project, and I appreciate the picture of what you're actually doing." Another said, "You clearly identified it was brush that was there and not eliminating something, but using something that's underutilized." Another said, "I think it's a great project, perfect place for it. Seems like it's the highest point, out of sight, out of mind. It's perfect. Most people on the board know that I have solar. It's probably one of the best things I have ever done, except for my leaky roof. But I think it's a great project, and I'm all for it. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman." Those are all quotes. The current solar law, I'd just like to speak to really briefly. We feel it's very well considered and hits on each topic of concern that's been raised by the discussions that have led to this call for a moratorium. Sets forth standards for buffers, 100-foot buffer, and that can be increased by the discretion of the planning board. Requirements not to clear more than 30% of the forest land on the site, decommissioning securities. In our reading, there really isn't a concern that's been voiced to the town board in support of the moratorium that can't be handled within the discretion afforded to the Planning Commission under the current law. And while we've put forth the Planning Commission a design we believe is fully compliant, projects are made better by rigorous review and productive dialogue. This Monday we received from the town engineer, a very comprehensive review letter, comments, some general in nature, some technical, all of which we're ready to respond to and address. And this is the kind of productive back and forth local planning and zoning is meant to support. I'll just say one thing on a comprehensive plan and wrap up. We recognize the value of the town board's efforts in updating its comprehensive plan. We also recognize and support the visions and goals articulated in the draft that prioritize protection of the environment and natural resources while supporting growing a tax base and employment opportunities. We believe the development of solar energy in the town is entirely consistent with this vision and these goals, particularly when supported by the protective provisions in the ordinance. Should the board consider moving forward to implement the moratorium, we believe the moratorium period should be limited to 6 months, given the degree to which the existing law can address matters of compatibility with the comprehensive plan. There are many options available in considering how review of solar projects should move forward in the town while ensuring sensitivity of local resources. Our sincere hope is that we can continue to work with the town through a local review process for seeker, special use permit, and site plan approval to ensure that through good dialogue, the future can see projects like ours, which make a meaningful contribution to the state's clean energy goals, bring benefits locally through well-paying construction jobs, a broadened tax base, and strengthening the infrastructure. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh Scholl?
Good evening. I'm Josh Scholl. I'm the business manager of Laborers Local 157. I represent roughly 500 plus members who make their living working on construction projects in the surrounding area. The renewable energy industry is one of our fastest growing segments of our workload. A roughly 20 megawatt project will create roughly 80 jobs, 40 of which will be laborers, creating good paying jobs with benefits for my members, which in turn they will use in our community to help drive our local economy. We're a local business. We're located in Rotterdam. We've been in Schenectady County since 1906. The men and women of Laborers Local 157 have helped build the infrastructure of this area for 116 years. We are committed to the community. Solar moratoriums negatively affect job opportunities for local labor, whether that be for apprentices looking to start a career or a current journey person trying to maintain their livelihood. Local 157 supports large-scale solar. The good paying jobs that it will create, as well as the opportunities it will provide to the area's young men and women looking to start a career in the construction industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Del Pierce.
Good evening. Madam Supervisor, members of the town board. I'm here, well, first of all, my name is Del Pierce. I live at 2253 Gens Road in Rotterdam, where I've raised my family, my wife and I have raised our family, and we've been there 45 years. So first, let me start with facts that I'm sure you all know, and I'll go through them quickly. Scientists have concluded that we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2040 if we are to avoid a future in which everyday life around the world is marked by its worst, most devastating effects: extreme droughts, wildfires, floods, tropical storms, and other disasters that we refer to collectively as climate change. It can seem rather nebulous to us in the Northeast. What does that have to do with us here in Rotterdam? Well, let's look around our own country then. Lake Mead's drying up, Lake Powell the same. Hurricanes have become more frequent and more powerful. Think Florida. Another example is the city of Coalinga, California, where city officials estimate their small town, population 17,465, will run out of water by December 1st because of prolonged drought. Global warming, as we know, is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. I think we all have an obligation to reduce our consumption of coal, fuel oil, and natural gas. How do we do that? Well, a major solution is to switch to renewables like wind and solar. On a personal note, our family supports a solar farm in Brunswick, New York. Each month we get credit on our national grid bill for power that this solar farm puts into the grid. We've saved a lot of money that way. I know that solar panels and windmills are not exactly pretty, but don't you think we should do our part here in Rotterdam? This project proposes to take 150 acres of a 450-acre plot. That sounds huge, but it's not without precedent in our town. The Helderberg Meadows project of just a few years ago resulted in the clearing of several hundred acres and ruined the view of and the actual quality of life of many residents, including myself and my family. Despite the pleas of residents on all sides of this development, including me and my neighbors, it went through and soon resulted in land being cleared on our very street. There was no talk of a moratorium then. Which brings me back to the proposed 18-month moratorium on solar developments. If you study the climate change data, we don't really have that luxury of time. Time to just sit and wait and then start the process and the clock all over again is not the answer. I would propose that we, as represented by our town board, look for alternative locations if it is decided we can't live with this location. Further, I would ask that our representatives work closely with solar suppliers so that the residents of this town do their part to stop global temperature rises. Let's do it for our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Brenda Terosian.
Thank you, Diane.
Brenda Terosian, 1033 6th Street in Rotterdam. I know at the last meeting, everybody on the board said that the report was behind you guys. Now we can move forward. It may be behind you people, it's not behind the residents of Rotterdam. I'm trying to figure out, how did we default on that lease when it was not an enforceable lease? And basically, it really wasn't a lease. It violated town and state law, which I didn't get a copy of the state law.
Working on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Now, according to the lease, and I've read it a few times, it said that that $1 million that the town gave to Viaport was to to get the spaces done to accommodate the town hall and the police court, which I'm sure as of right now, they didn't do anything with it. Now, according to the town lawyer, and I am anticipating a rebuttal at the end of the night, the town and Viaport were negotiating for several months on this deal. The deal was voided in July. My question is, and I know you're not going to like it, was Viaport tipped off about what we were planning on doing? Samantha, the only lawyer on the town board, excluding you, sir, said that the numbers did not add up. She was blindsided by this like the rest of the residents. And she told us that over here, not only to me, but it was a whole bunch of residents that heard her. $250,000 comes from the taxpayers. Why were the residents not informed about the negotiations? I know Mr. Dobson said, we don't want to tip our hand to Viaport. $250,000. Once again, what was Rotterdam's counter offer to Viaport? Residents of Rotterdam deserve and demand answers. Viaport is not behind us, not behind the residents. Okay, now we're going to go to the budget. If I'm not mistaken, when I was at the first budget meeting, there was a line item thing about $2,000 allocated towards your people in your office to run Zoom. And I know 2,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money. Why did this board here not contact the local high schools and the local colleges for kids who need to get internship credit to come here, and wouldn't cost the town a penny, to do the Zoom, and they will get college or high school credits? And another thing, how many people actually are on the Zoom, are watching this town hall? Just wondering. If you don't want to answer now, I hope you have an answer by the end of the night. The $34 million water project. I know you guys gave District 5 a little tax break. Not really, but it wasn't a tax break for next year. When this project goes through, how much is the residents in District 5 going to pay for this project? It just seems to me that you guys are throwing us a little bit of a bone, only to get screwed in the coming years. And also, I mean, I read the referendum, and unless you have a law degree, it's very hard to figure out what's in how the referendum is stated. It needs to be done in English so every one of us can understand. And one more thing, and I'll go, I already saw your hand. We need to put a moratorium on the solar project, just to find out what's going on. And 150 acres may not seem like a lot to the people that are doing the constructing of the solar panels, but it's a lot of acres, and it's a lot of vegetative things that are going to be lost, and the animals, the wildlife. People are going to start complaining, and I'll tell you why. Because Rotterdam is very famous knocking down trees, so those animals have no place to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim Snelly?
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Scannell. I live at 257 Crawford Road in the town of Rotterdam, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you so much for upholding your responsibility to the town and its citizens. Thank you to Mr. Cousteau for quickly and swiftly calling for a resolution at the last town board meeting to propose a solar moratorium. Thank you, Mr. Tingley, for getting it done at this point in time. I know that you had to react very quickly, so I appreciate that. With regard to the actual draft moratorium, I'm a little concerned that it doesn't include wind energy as well as solar energy. I think that might be a procedural thing, because I think that the resolution was directing the town attorney to propose a solar moratorium. If that's not the case, I urge you to contemplate a wind moratorium as well. I think it would be counterproductive to wait 6 months and be in the same position that we are again, to have both solar farms and proposed wind farms align more greatly with our comprehensive plan. So I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the things that we've heard tonight. I know that Jamie from Eastlight Partners came up for this meeting, and I appreciate that. But in the same vein, I find it a little self-serving, which is what I have found of Eastlight Partners all along. I'm not sure, Jamie, if you actually read the comprehensive plan so that you can understand why it is so important to Rotterdam and to its residents that we actually do have a moratorium, that we take a minute to pause. Because over the course of the past 2 years, the scale of the proposed solar farms has increased substantially, and the existing performance standards may no longer be sufficient to adequately protect the neighborhood or community character from the impacts of such large-scale solar developments, like the one that is proposed by Eastlight's partners. While I agree that we need new energy, new reform to the way we've been doing things for such a long time, I don't think we have to just jump in with both feet. I think we have a responsibility and a duty to do it in a manner that protects not just the town, but what options we could have for the future with renewable energy. Solar and wind energy have many different components. They can be handled in many different ways. There's a big difference between a utility scale solar project and a community-based solar project. Right now, our code does not take that into consideration when we think about what should we do. I do think that when Eastlight Partners approached the board early on in June of 2020, the planning board, I think that the planning board was doing their job. They were looking at the existing code, which came into play in 2017. And there's a lot that has changed between now and then. As Jamie pointed out, we're supposed to, as a state, have 70% renewable energy by 2030. It makes perfect sense for us to take some time at this moment to stop, to pause, to reflect on what's working, and to make changes to things that might not be working. We spent a lot of time on our comprehensive plan, and while it might not be important to outsiders that are really just looking at their own pocketbook at the end of the day, it is important to me. It's important to the residents, and I am appreciative that is important to all of you. With regard to the construction jobs, I think that it is important to note that Governor Hochul announced 22 large-scale renewable energy projects this year. So I think that we will be able to keep a lot of construction workers busy. I wouldn't want that to not be the case, but I think that there are opportunities within the renewable energy sector for those contractors to stay super busy. I also note that while Mr. Pierce brought up a lot of very good points, he sees a credit on his national grid bill every month that none of us would see with this proposed project. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your energies in our comprehensive plan, and I urge you to stay the course because you're doing a great job so far. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak who did not sign up? Megan, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak? Oh, wait.
Good evening, thank you for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to...
I'm sorry, can I have your name?
I'm sorry, Patty Madlitz, 457 Sanborn Road, Pattersonville. I don't think there's anybody in the room that would argue that clean energy is important and, you know, the future is important, but I do think that we should continue with the moratorium and take a pause. As Kim said, there's 22 projects that have already been approved that should bring us well close to the governor's points that she wants to make. And I think pausing on this one and maybe considering a different site to Mr. Pierce's point, you know, New York State's a big state. There's probably a lot of places that would be less intrusive to residents and less destructive to the scene. I'm looking at Eastlight Partners' website, and part of their mission statement is that they want to be welcomed within the host communities. Maybe if they want to be welcomed in a host community, be respectful of whatever time our town needs to decide what is good for our town. And I do appreciate that, you know, folks need to work, and there are plenty of other construction areas and other construction jobs that people can have. So please, I encourage you to move forward with the moratorium, and that our town should take the time that it needs, not the time that Eastlight Partners would like us to take. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak that maybe didn't sign up?
Good evening, Kyle Quinn, 807 Sanborn Road. Sorry, I got this on my phone here. I didn't have anything with me in the truck. Just wanted to hit on a couple points from tonight. I just dig holes all day. That's my job. I'm not professional in this, but as far as I know, the moratorium is not to discuss or to whether renewable energy is good or bad, but it's to align the code for the solar with our comprehensive plan and what works with our town. And that's what I understood, and I think that's basically what it is. I just wanted to touch on that. One thing I did notice about, you know, the jobs, again, it's not whether we need the jobs or we don't need the jobs. It's you know, I drive around to a lot of the solar facilities going in the area, and most of the license plates I see on the construction trucks, on the trucks running in, a lot of them are out of state. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's one thing I do notice a lot. I know they do hire local companies for this and that, but as far as I'm concerned, most of the license plates are from out of state. And not only do I think just the town, but I think the entire county needs to look at this in a whole, and, you know, for all our surrounding municipalities, I guess. Other than that, I think we should move forward, you know, with what the plan was, and again, align our comprehensive plan and our new solar code together. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak that's in the audience and didn't sign up? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Nobody that has expressed they would like to speak.
Then I'm closing the privilege of the floor, and we'll go on with the resolution. Our first resolution is resolution number 318 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To accept town board meeting minutes.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
3 yes, 2 absent.
resolution passes. Next resolution is resolution 319 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To appoint an information processing specialist 1.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Is Ms. Green here tonight? No. Our next resolution is resolution number 320 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To authorize an agreement with Lane Christensen Company for the cleaning and rehabilitation services of well number 2.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Next resolution is resolution number 321 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To declare computers obsolete.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Next resolution is resolution 322 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers to the 2022 budget.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 323 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To recognize the introduction of introductory local law number 10 of 2022 and scheduling a public hearing thereon.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. I am the one who tasked our, and brought up the motion to have Mr. Timmy draw up the language for holding this moratorium. For the record, this is probably the first moratorium I've ever been in favor of in my entire career. And even as a resident in the past, I've never been in favor of moratoriums. This one impacted me for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I agree that new forms of energy are very important. And this is not a debate on new forms of energy, nor is it a debate on large-scale solar. But we have to make sure that we are prudent and responsible as we select locations for opportunities like solar projects, okay? Although I respect planning commission members who said it's a perfect place for it, clearly the people in that community, people that look out their doors, felt differently. And if there's anything that I have learned, especially over this past year, is pay attention to what your residents are saying, okay? And yes, I agree, productive dialogue must happen, but it also must include the residents that will be impacted by this or any other project. So I welcome that productive dialogue as well, and I think that a public hearing is the best format for that. So I think that a public hearing is extremely important in this case, okay? This is not, again, a debate on large-scale solar. It's a discussion on making sure that we move forward responsibly with solar. I have a concern, not with this particular company, I don't know much about this company, but the solvency of a lot of these solar companies. We have on Route 5S a solar project that sits there empty, doesn't even have a fence around it, okay? Why? Because the company went bankrupt. And the dollar amounts that we're looking for performance bonds do not make sense many times. And these are the kind of things that you discuss during a moratorium. So, this is very important. Personally, I also don't think a housing development and a solar farm are an apple-to-apple comparison, but that's just my own opinion. And as we move forward in this discussion at the public hearing, I'm going to urge the public a couple of things. Number one, I don't want to see disparaging comments against these landowners. These landowners are in their 70s on this property. They have every right in the world to put this property up for sale. Okay, if you want to discuss what the project that is proposing, that's fine. But let's not disparage our neighbors. We've done too much of that lately. And I've spoken to people both in this room and out of this room. Some of your neighbors just choose to remain apolitical. They want to stay neutral. They want to be Switzerland. Let's try to respect that as well. Okay? Please. There's a time and a place for discussions. I think that a public hearing is a perfect time and place for this discussion. I really don't think we need to disparage the landowners or our neighbors. That's all I ask. That's all I have, Madam Supervisor.
With that, I'd like to make the motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes for the public hearing.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani is absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes, but I would like to state that my vote isn't against solar energy or any particular company. I do believe our code moving forward has to be brought up to date. I too am very worried about decommissioning and what it would cost the town residents 20 years down the road. I don't see this as really a climate issue or a solar power issue as much as it is bringing our code into the 21st century.
3 yes, 2 no. Or 3 yes, 2 absent, sorry.
Resolution passes. The next resolution is resolution number 324 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To accept a gift from Vincey's Printing.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. The clerk will read will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Next is resolution number 325 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To authorize the highway superintendent to participate in the MUSA bid auction for the purchase of 1 snow plow.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Next resolution is resolution 326 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To appoint a police officer.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution passes. I believe we're going to have the swearing in now.
So Officer Opalka is a former high school graduate of Mahonison High School, Hudson Valley Community College. She's also a former Albany County Sheriff's Deputy, and she is currently working serving in the U.S. Army at reserves as a combat engineer. She went through a extensive background investigation, interview process, and we're happy and excited to be bringing her on board. Give you the oath of office here. Left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and just repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Anna Opalka,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of police officer
the duties of office of police officer
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I'll just present her badge. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next resolution is resolution 327 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To approve the changes made to the 2023 preliminary budget and to adopt the 2023 final budget.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second the motion. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani absent. Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
3 yes, 2 absent.
resolution passes. That concludes our resolutions for the night. Do I have a motion for this board to go into executive session for the collective?
Do you want to do these others first?
That's up to you. Would you like to? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what's
Sorry.
You're the chair. You decide.
Yes.
We'll do liaison reports first. Are there any board members that have anything to report on liaison committees? Do any of the board members have anything under miscellaneous?
Do you want to say anything about the Christmas celebration?
Yeah. We are going to be having a Christmas celebration on, well, we're having a tree lighting, I should say, that's the correct wording for it, on December 4th. It'll be here at Town Hall. We are having Clydesdales come with a wagon so that adults and children will be able to take a ride around the Town Hall building. We're going to be having a cookie decorations station for the younger children, hopefully some music. And it's our hope that Rotterdam residents come out after COVID and everything else. We'd like to start seeing more community activities and getting reacquainted with each other. So I hope everybody can make that. And also on December 7th, we should also be having the memorial for Pearl Harbor Day.
The holiday celebration timing,
3 to 7.
3 to
3
7.
o'clock to 7 o'clock.
Anything else from any board members?
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the collective bargaining unit discussion.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We're leaving for executive session at 7:40.